my colleague Melissa, and like Marion said, we're family therapists here. So what we're going to talk about tonight, so we're just going to have a quick look on what is systemic or family therapy and who we work with. We'll also touch in on some of the ideas that guide us as family therapists, so looking at circular questions, the use of genograms, how we work with social construction, and working with labels and diagnosis. And we'll have a look at how they work with the clients and different families that come to see us. We also decided to pick just two of the key approaches that work for systemic therapists. That would be narrative therapy and collaborative therapy, and just look again at how they work with different types of families.
Okay, so we're going to start with what is systemic therapy. So it's a broad term given to a range of methods for working with families with various difficulties, from health problems to communication and relational difficulties. So it seeks to address people not only on the individual level, but also as people in relationships, dealing with interactions of groups, their patterns and dynamics.
So there are many different theories of family therapy, and some focus on the role that the family may play in people developing the problems, while others focus on how people would maintain those problems within the family. But all family therapists highlight the role that the family play in problem resolution, so finding solutions. And basically it just means that no one person in the family is at fault. We look at everyone who comes to the sessions and everyone who's in the family, even if they're not there. So family therapy works to enhance and improve communication and assist in shared understanding of situations, which in turn allow people who are in difficulty to reach solutions tailored to their own needs and circumstances.
So who do we work with? So we work with a multitude of issues across the life spectrum. So we see a variety of clients, from children to adolescents to adults, individuals, couples and entire families. As each family and each situation is different, we can adapt to the situation and what that particular family may need, whether it's maybe individual or group sessions. So we work with a variety of people.
So to take a look at some of the ideas that guide us as systemic therapists. So one of the main focus is not seeing, the individual is not seen as the problem. So we look at the wider family system and just see what's working and what's not working. So this helps us to look beyond the individual with the presenting problems. So quite often families might turn up and they'll say, this is the one person who's the problem, maybe the person who argues the most or who doesn't get on with people. But we don't focus solely on that one person. So this helps us prevent a problem-saturated situation. So we look at how others interact in that situation, so how they respond to this person.
So it provides space to be curious about all members and space to hear all voices. So we focus on analysing patterns of behaviour and identifying problem cycles. So sometimes when you're in a situation, it can be difficult to see the bigger picture. So as systemic therapists, we take a meta perspective, which means that we look at the situation from like a helicopter view or a bird's eye view of the whole situation. So, which could be compared to this picture. So it'd be like being maybe on one of the streets and all you can see is the buildings around you. But taking the helicopter view or bird's eye view, you can see all the buildings and the factors that may influence how you're feeling at this particular moment in the situation.
Okay, so another guideline that we use is using circular questions. So they're basically just open-ending, gentle questions that are used to explore connections, patterns and beliefs. So the therapist would take a position of neutrality, which basically just means we stay neutral. We try not to take sides for anyone in the family. We also have a position of curiosity, so we're constantly asking questions, being curious, what's that like for the family, how do people react to it, where do they think it came from. We use these to modify our hypothesis, so it's a gentle way to challenge people who maybe have already had views when they come into the sessions. And then it opens up space to co-construct any new belief systems. So sometimes clients do have already defined beliefs, and that affects their interaction with others of why they're behaving a certain way. So we can gently challenge that and wonder where that came from.
So we use the questions to inquire about interactional patterns. So the patterns of how people communicate, the patterns of conflict and why arguments begin, how they're maintained, and is it the same argument that's happening over and over. And it offers us a new way to discuss family relationships.
Another guide that we have is using a genogram. So this is an example we made up for today. There's no real people here. And it's basically, so anyone that comes, if it's couples, entire families, or just an individual, we map out their family tree. So we record everything from their names, ages, who their parents are, brothers, sisters, as you can see, their locations. We have, in this, there's obviously a diversity. We decided to show that people, might be living in different places and how that affects the family. One of the other things that's good about it is we would map out different relationships. Again, it's like a bird's eye view for the family to see their entire situation of the family that they're in. So we just took 2 examples. So the red line would be close relationships, so people who get on very well and are very supportive and are working well together in the system. And the green lines might show conflict or someone who's arguing a lot. So it is just a family tree, but it also has the relationships. This allows the family members to discuss the relationships within the family. So again, who gets on with who? Was it always that way? Was there a change? What happened around the time of change? And it also allows the therapist to get to know these relationships in depth at the beginning before you move on into the process of therapy.
So we can bring other voices into the room by asking questions such as, what would your mother think of this situation? Or if your brother knew about this, what would he think? It can look at the family of origin for parents, how it's influenced their own upbringing, or maybe how it's influenced their own parenting styles. And it can identify patterns of behaviour and cycles that are repeating themselves throughout the generations.
Another idea that guides us is the use of social construction. So it's basically just the belief that there's no one truth. So we all have situations in our lives and events that happen, and how we think about them is based on how we experience them. So you and I could experience the same situation, but we'd look at it a different way based on our feelings. Social construction also looks at the meaning of words and the use of language. So language is actually very important, and it can really change the significance or the meaning of a situation. So like an example of that is someone who would come and would be talking about panic attacks. So when you think of an attack, straight away it's a victim, it's someone who's vulnerable, powerless, hopelessness. And that can really help that person feel hopeless in the situation, because all these words are immediately in their mind. So if we change those words and talk about a moment of panic, a moment is brief, you can get control back, you can get some of that power back, and it helps that person just see the situation different.
So meaning making it's the sense we make of a situation. An example might be if somebody was behaving nicely, it may not be trusted based on their past behaviours or situations, and it focuses on strengths. And the focus on strengths builds a sense of positivity, which can enhance somebody's self-esteem, which makes them feel more control or power over the situation that they're in.
So it often involves working with labels and diagnosis. So people are given labels or a diagnosis based on the symptoms that meet a certain criteria. As systemic therapists, we just see that everyone has their own way of being in the world. This allows the therapist and the client to discuss how we are all different. So it doesn't really matter in what way we're different, it's how we cope with that and understand that, and how we understand others' differences. That's what really matters.
And it allows the therapist to look beyond the label and diagnosis, to see the person and how they're coping with life. For example, somebody with a label might introduce themselves as, I'm depressed, or I'm unwell, I'm disturbed, I'm anxious. And with systemic therapy, we look beyond that label, and we're looking we want to know more about their lives and their situations that they're in and how they manage their label.
Yeah, so one of the key approaches that we do use is narrative therapy. So narrative therapy is the understanding that our lives are shaped by the stories that we create about them. So events happen in all of our lives that we cannot change, but how we view these events, that's something we can change. Because people believe things about themselves based on these events or stories that they've lived or they've heard about themselves. And these beliefs in turn can shape how a person feels about themselves or others.
So some of the methods that are used is authoring stories. So the client may have already authored a story about themselves, or about a particular situation, or perhaps the family have authored this story about them.
Yeah, so for example, if someone believes that something happened to them because it's their fault, they're a loser, they deserve it, and these things always happen to me, I'm always getting bad luck. You kind of believe then that bad things are always going to happen to you in your life.
So from there then we'd look at reauthoring a story. So after analysing and discussing the situation, we'd work with the client to re-alter this story, which in turn changes how they see and feel about the situation.
Yeah, so instead of saying that it always happens, this was a once-off thing, it wasn't your fault, you didn't do anything, you don't deserve it. So instead of getting bogged down by all this bad luck, they can start to see, well, how can I deal with this situation? How can I change it going forward?
So some of the techniques used would be exceptions to the dominant story. So we try to find an exception to the authored story. Like, for example, if somebody feels like they always fail, we look for the exceptions where they haven't failed, where they've succeeded. And another technique that we use is reframing. So we offer new and different ways of seeing a problem, which can help the client find a solution.
Yeah, and some of the other techniques is highlighting and amplifying. So when we do find those exceptions where they didn't fail, it's about really highlighting that. So what happened there? Why in this situation did you not fail? And really amplifying and digging deep into that to figure out what was different about it. And then that leads into extending that. So we extend that story into the future. So in future scenarios, if you were in the position again, now that you've looked back on that, what techniques did you use that could change what will happen the next time? How can you make sure that you won't fail or that you can try your best not to?
So another approach that we use is collaborative therapy. So collaborative therapy empowers families to find their own solutions. The therapist takes a not knowing position and sees themselves as not being the expert. The client is regarded as the expert in their own life story as they have lived it. This offers a therapeutic relationship where the client can feel that their point of view is seen as being just as important as the therapist's. This balance of power allows the client to feel more open and comfortable in the sessions.
So I have a very battered old example here. It's been well loved, so that's why it doesn't look the best. So this is just an idea, it gives you a good grasp. So as a therapist, when we come in, we have a lot of training and experience, we've experienced with other families. We do have things that we look for and we can offer ideas, but we have to adapt with that. We can't think we know it all because the client also brings a lot to the room. So they have a past history, they know their family, they know their fears, their worries, where it's come from. So the space here is kind of like our session, it's the space between the two of us, and we have to work together to create that space. So when change occurs, it's not that the therapist can tell you to do it, they knew what to do. It was that they offer ideas and the client might say, well, that will work or it won't work for my family, and try and change it and adapt it. So it's co-created together.
So a method of collaborative therapy would be that, as Sarah described in her diagram there, that we work as a shared research. So therapy is seen as a joint research project where both the client and the therapist investigate together.
Yeah, and again, it's just that co-constructing the outcomes. So the therapist and the client work together to create new belief systems. But there is really a focus on understanding the client's worldview and really honouring the client's ability to determine their own path.
And as described, we use the not knowing position. So the client is expert by experience of having lived their life.
Okay, and one of the techniques that we use is just the authoritative doubt. So that is basically just what I've just explained, that it allows the therapist to own our own expertise as well as knowing that we do not have absolute knowledge. So we offer the theories and ideas to the client, but we don't assume we are right. They're up for discussion with the client.
So one of the main focuses in collaborative therapy is the therapeutic relationship. The therapist places importance on building an open and trusting relationship with clients.
We also use our inner conversations, so it's used to develop theories which are offered to the client. So that's basically just monitoring our own thoughts, but we don't keep them to ourselves. If something came up, you might say, I'm really interested in that. Is there a connection? You offer that to the client and they'll say, well, maybe it fits, maybe it doesn't, but we're constantly offering our own ideas to the client.
So in conclusion, systemic family therapy looks at systems and does not individualize the problem to any one person, but rather looks to widen the lens and view the situation from a meta perspective, the helicopter view.
Yeah, so again, we work with individuals, couples, families, from children to adults with varying issues. We use a variety of approach methods and techniques, but we're consistently re-evaluating these techniques throughout our sessions. We're also adapting as needed to suit the clients, and we pay particular attention to our own position in the process.
So I'll leave you with the following quote. Feelings of worth can only flourish in an atmosphere where individual differences are appreciated, mistakes are tolerated, communication is open, and rules are flexible. The kind of atmosphere that is found in a nurturing family. Thank you.